If you've got 2,000 applicants for, say, 20 openings, there is no way that any human is going to go through all 2,000 applicants. So you have to rely on the technology. And a lot of the ATS now use AI to rank those candidates. They score them. And so the typical recruiter is going to only look at the candidates who are well ranked, who are scored above a certain number, and they're never going to look at those who scored below a certain number. If you're not hired, by definition, you are rejected. And if it's the AI that's ranking you poorly, that's causing you not to be reviewed by a human. That's causing you not to be interviewed. That's causing you not to be hired. So you are essentially being rejected by the AI.
Welcome to Backstage Pass with the HR Rockstar, the show that pulls back the curtain and cranks up the volume on the most pressing HR topics, from talent strategies and workplace culture to career pivots and leadership. Because in today's world, HR isn't just behind the scenes, it's center stage. I'm your host, Jay Arnold, and in the world of HR and talent, there are times we recognize top performers within the workplace, sometimes referred to as rock stars. This podcast combines my love of HR as my career with my experience of 10 plus years performing shows around Michigan and the Midwest in my rock band, chasing the dream of being an actual rock star. Join me as I sit down with rock stars in their fields to have fun, insightful conversations that keep the human in human resources. Together we'll disrupt, innovate, and amplify the future of work. So grab your pass, turn it up, and let's make some noise. Welcome to Backstage Pass with the HR Rockstar, now part of the Work Defined Network. Today's guest is someone who's been shaping the way early career talent connects with employers for decades. Joining me is Stephen Rothberg, the founder and chief visionary officer of College Recruiter, a platform that has helped millions of students and recent grads find meaningful work. Stephen's entrepreneurial roots go all the way back to selling candy in fifth grade and running a fantasy hockey league in college, skills he since channeled into building one of the most respected brands in the talent acquisition space. You might also recognize his voice from podcasts like Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplace and High Volume Hiring. So let's jump into it. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the show.
AJ, it is great to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
For those that may not know your background or story, could you give a brief overview of your career, what made you get into recruiting, and particularly college recruiting after going to law school?
Yeah, so I grew up in Winnipeg, Canada. For those who aren't perfectly up to date or familiar with Canadian geography, it's basically right in the center of the country, about 500 miles northwest of Minneapolis, where I live today. I moved here for grad school, for law school, graduated, was working as a lawyer in the first year, and then decided to get out and enjoy my life. So I started a small business that within a few years had morphed into publishing employment magazines. The employment magazines, there were 4 different regionalized versions distributed by a few hundred colleges and universities, mostly to the graduating students. For those listening in the US, seniors, those in most other areas of the world, 4th year students, graduates, whatever. And employers purchased ads in the magazine, and the career service offices gave the magazines away for free to their graduating students. And then in 1996, this thing called the internet came along. And we literally took the magazines, cut out the ads, scanned them, uploaded them to a website that we paid $3,000 to have built by a high school kid. And kind of a new business was formed. So over the next 4 years, the business gradually morphed from primarily being the print publications to being the job search site. And by 2000, it was just online. Today, we help about 12 million students and recent grads with 0 to 5 years of experience in dozens of countries find part-time, seasonal, internship, apprenticeship, and other what we call entry-level jobs. Those require 0 to 5 years of experience. So it's been a ride.
This brought up some memories of early days of the internet there, and that's it's pretty fun to look back on now, all these years later.
Well, most of it's fun. The sound of your dial-up modem failing to connect, that wasn't so fun.
Yeah, I remember like early on, it was like, go make a cup of coffee while it's trying to get on that AOL dial-up and stuff. And of course, you had the My kids have no idea what that was. They had to find the YouTube clips so they can understand it because they wouldn't survive.
Yeah,
We were
but
we
you
were roughing it back then.
but Jay, you could send a Word document across town in under an hour. I mean,
Yeah,
it was amazing.
and looking at where things are now, I mean, we're going right from early days of internet to crazy times with AI.
Hmm.
AI is everywhere in HR tech right now, from screening to scheduling to even really making some hiring decisions. And there's debate around that. What's your take on where AI fits best in today's recruiting process? You've spoken about like the different risk of AI powered machines and ranking tools. What are some of the dangerous assumptions maybe companies are making when they adopt these systems?
Yeah, thank you for the question. One of the things that I'm seeing too many employers doing is taking the word of the marketing people and the salespeople at some of these tech platforms as being true. And in some cases, the tech platforms, the AI vendors, they know better. In some cases, the people who work there actually believe that what they're saying is true, and sometimes it is. But a lot of it is sales puff, and it's starting to come back to bite these organizations. But one of the big dangers of these AI systems is that under US law, the employer, regardless of what the vendor says or guarantees or contractually promises, the employer's liable for discriminatory hiring practices. And they have the burden of proving that what they're doing is non-discriminatory. They can't just point a finger at the vendor and say, well, they said it was fine. They can't get rid of their liability by doing that. The vendor might also be liable, but at the end of the day, you've got to be able to prove not just that you think that the AI ranked, maybe even selected candidates in a certain way using certain criteria, but that you can prove that it did. And what we're starting to hear, including from like Anthropic writing about their own AI, is that if you go to the AI and say, how did you reach this decision? It will give you back a very plausible answer. And that sounds right. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. And it's all good and it's perfectly legal. Ask it the same question again a minute later, it will give you a different answer. Ask it the same question again a minute later, it'll give you a third answer. So, what the AI apparently is doing is it's guessing at how it arrived at an answer. It's almost like if you and I went back to this conversation at the end of it and said, hey, Jay, remember when you said XYZ? What were you thinking at that moment? You might give it your best guess and maybe you're going to be right, but probably you're not going to really remember why it was that you chose to say certain words in a certain order. And that's what the AI is doing. For employers, that's incredibly dangerous. They can't reliably figure out like why did we say to Cindy no and to Fred yes. All they can do is guess, and guessing isn't good enough.
Or a hiring decision if they had relied on a tool, and why did this candidate pass one or two virtual walls and the other ones didn't? So you just shared some good examples. Sure. What are some other examples maybe where AI has improved hiring outcomes, especially like in high volume or, like you said, early career hiring? Maybe on the other side, where is AI missing the mark?
So, like some examples of where I think it's proven to be massively beneficial is by augmenting or assisting people, by taking some of the grunt work off of the desks of the recruiters, maybe hiring managers. So, to me, a fantastic example is something like interview scheduling. Rather than a recruiter trying to line up interviews with like 5 different people on the company side, say like 3 different recruiters, a hiring manager, and somebody else with a whole bunch of different candidates. I mean, all that back and forth. And is this person available? Is that person available? Trying to coordinate all of that. Somebody didn't update their calendar and that person's your boss. So you can't really do anything about it. Now you got to go back to square zero. Like AI does that incredibly well. And that's not a value add. That's not something that any recruiter or any hiring manager really adds value in scheduling interviews. Some of the things that AI I think is doing very poorly is, and yet a lot of larger employers are using it this way, is the ranking, the scoring of candidates. I keep seeing on LinkedIn employers saying, The AI is not making hiring decisions, that people are making those hiring decisions. There's some truth to that. So let me give you an example from the high volume space. It's different than if you're hiring, say, a CFO and you've got 8 candidates. If you've got 8 candidates, a recruiter, a hiring manager can go through every one of those and consider them and can probably come up with reasons why they ranked candidate A as first, candidate B as third, et cetera. But if you've got 2,000 applicants for, say, 20 openings, there is no way that any human is going to go through all 2,000 applicants. So you have to rely on the technology. And a lot of the ATS now use AI to rank those candidates. They score them. And so the typical recruiter is going to only look at the candidates who are well ranked, who are scored above a certain number. And they're never going to look at those who scored below a certain number. If you never look at candidates who score below a certain number, those candidates de facto are being rejected. So although a human didn't say, I am rejecting Jay because Jay scored below a certain number, if you're not hired, by definition, you are rejected. And if it's the AI that's ranking you poorly, that's causing you not to be reviewed by a human. That's causing you not to be interviewed. That's causing you not to be hired. So you are essentially being rejected by the AI. Again, employer after employer after employer will say, no, we don't automatically reject that way. But when you ask them about, do you look at every single resume in a high volume situation, they just don't. They just can't. So what I worry about for employers, and to a lesser extent, the vendors that are selling them this, is that the AI cannot, with today's tech, adequately, accurately explain why Jay had a 52 score and Stephen had a 43. It will guess as to why that's the case. But again, guessing isn't good enough.
Yeah, this is where it gets tricky with some of the tools that are rolling out. Um, that kind of leads to another question is there is growing concern with transparency and fairness and AI hiring tools. How do you see organizations, be sure their tools aren't reinforcing systematic bias? Because like you said, there's our ATSs or websites for companies that say we don't use AI or we use it very minimally. I've seen one where it says something similar to what you just said, like you can even opt out to have a human review your information. There's some platforms you upload your resume that gives you a score that you're a strong match, you're, a match, or a weak match. On the surface, you're like, this is great. I'm a strong match. I should at least have a phone screen. Well, you and like you said, 2,000 other people. How can organizations, from your perspective, be sure their tools aren't, again, reinforcing systematic bias? And should candidates be told when AI is making the decisions about them?
Yeah, one thing is test it. You just went through a process last month, not you, Jay, but I'm just kind of making this up. But you just went through a process last month where you hired 20 people and you got 2,000 applications, had humans doing that work, and these were the 20 best, right? Or at least the 20 that were well qualified that said yes, not necessarily the best, right? Run the same process through the AI and see what happens. Now, I think your point is excellent that there inevitably is bias, whether it's people, whether it's machines. There's going to be bias. So nobody is claiming that people are always unbiased and machines are always biased. That's not the test. The test is also not, is the AI less biased than the people, right? Legally, it has to be unbiased. You have to prove that it is unbiased. The fact that you inevitably have some bias with humans does not let the AI off the hook. What that says is you need to fix the bias with the humans. You are potentially liable for that bias. So just because your system is somewhat broken does not mean that it's okay to automate what's broken. You're driving around with a car and you've got 2 flat tires. You need to fix that. The fact that your car only has 1 flat tire does not mean that you can get on the freeway that all is good. It's better, but it's not good enough. So I think that we're going to quickly see a significant change because let's be candid, the problems with the AI systems not being able to accurately describe how they reach decisions. This isn't just a recruiting problem. This is a problem with scientific research. This is a problem with people who are writing book reports. It's a problem with anything. We, as a society, in all facets, if we're going to use a tool, we want to know why the tool or how the tool did that job, particularly when it's something like AI. So I think we're likely months, maybe a year away from Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, the other big makers of AI, X, formerly Twitter with its Grok AI, being able to accurately give you the answers. Like, this is how I reached a decision. If you know how it actually reached the decision, not just how it's guessing at how it reached the decision, then when there are problems, then you can go in and fix that. And I don't think that this is a forever problem. I think we're in this weird transition place right now. So one piece of advice that I would give to employers is don't rush into this. Is somebody going to die if you don't use AI in your hiring process, or that you limit it and so that there's always people involved? It will be less efficient. You will have to spend less money, but you're going to reach better decisions. You're going to hire better people. And at the end of the day, I think that's what it's all about. I feel like we're in too much of a rush. A lot of the AI vendors are selling with fear. If you don't use this tool, you're going to be left behind. And I think that it's up to the TA leaders to say, no, we can go slowly. We can do this properly. People can criticize Apple all they want for not jumping into the AI bandwagon. Right now, I'm kind of thinking Apple is going to leapfrog a lot of these AI companies. Yeah, they don't really have much of a presence today, but in the meantime, they're watching, they're going to create a system that is better. It's not about being first to market. It's about being right. It's about doing it well. So better to go slowly and properly than quickly and poorly.
I think there's a saying I've heard recently: instead of always trying to be right, it's better to be effective. And there's some truth to that, because or being first, you want to be effective. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
there's a lot of truth to that, because I like the Apple example, because what are they doing? And I think we might be surprised whether it's 3, 6 months from now or a year from now, right? We just don't know. We know they're going to do something great. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah. And look how great for those of us like me with iPhones, man, when Siri came out, how fantastic. Now I hate it. It's basically the same thing, right? I can't wait for Apple to come out with good AI so I can talk to my phone and get the score of a game or the current weather. And it doesn't tell me that, it doesn't have that data or it doesn't understand me. There is no doubt that they're going to be massively improving their products when the time is right. But, Apple was not the first to market with a smartphone, but they were the first to market with a really great smartphone. And I think that's what we're going to see. And hopefully some of the TA vendors are going to start to take that approach as well.
Yeah, because you mentioned companies using AI, but they dial it back and have more humans, in recruiting and TA, look at things. At the end of the day, the biggest metric isn't, time to fill, time to accept, it's quality of hire. And quality of hire really falls on the hiring manager and the hiring team. So I could be a leader in TA presenting you as the hiring manager with these great candidates. And I'm working with you during intake calls saying, Steve, what do you need? We go over those top 5, deal breakers. Like, they have to have A, B, C, D in order to be successful in this role. So what you're saying is, if they have A through D, you at least want to have a call with them, a Teams call, a Zoom call. And that's where it's like, wait, AI might be able to help. And that's what kind of leads to another question: is smaller mid-sized teams, because when you mentioned some of the platforms and examples, I'm thinking of large, real big companies where, like, you are getting those 2,000 applicants for one role. But for smaller mid-sized teams, how can they benefit from AI without overhauling everything? And of course, everyone's always on a budget. Money is finite, and it's like almost kind of like a sample platter, if you will, of AI for a smaller team to try before you buy, kind of thing. So I'm trying to think, what would that look like for a smaller team that can't invest millions into a platform that very well might be outdated in a year?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the sample platter, we're recording this just before lunch. So now you're making me think of like, I wonder if Jay would be interested in splitting some like mozzarella sticks and chicken wings or something like that. But anyway, that's another topic for another podcast. I think I think you hit on an important issue, and that is the SMBs, the small and medium sized businesses, are not adopting AI at the same rate as large, and the benefits will not flow the same way. I think that in a lot of ways, right now, the SMBs are behind the large employers because the large employers are using tools like ATS that small employers don't or rarely do. And the ATS and the assessments, virtually all of them use AI in some way. So the smaller organizations are just not using those tools and therefore not using AI as much. However, you've got this little company headquartered in Austin, Texas, you may have heard of, called Indeed. And Indeed is going to be forcing small employers using its, kind of like one click apply. Indeed kind of is like a light ATS for a lot of small employers. So as Indeed forces the small employers to share that disposition data, did that click convert into an application? Did you offer them an interview? Did you take an assessment? Did you extend an offer? Did they get hired? Indeed's going to know all of that for all those SMBs very quickly later this year. And that means that those small companies, those small employers are going to be using AI, and they're going to be using it from sort of the beginning to the end of the hiring process, right? From attraction to rate to hire, because they use Indeed for all of that. Is going to put SMBs ahead of large organizations later in 2025. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think for the vast majority of SMBs, that's going to be massively beneficial. I think they're going to very quickly get away from a lot of the noise. Indeed is going to help them focus on the best candidates for them. Their hiring does not look at all like a high volume employer. And it's just like, it's not only at a different scale, but also, I mean, let's be candid, the federal government, when it's looking for bias in hiring, it is not looking at Fred's taco shop on the corner who has 4 employees. Like, they're not immune, but they might as well be, because they're never going to be a target. The targets are going to be the Fortune 1000 companies. It's not like your tiny little ATS vendor where you've got like 4 companies using it with a total of 200 employees and the guy who wrote the code as a full-time job and just does this as like a side hustle. That's not the TA vendor that's going to be the target. It's Workday. It's Greenhouse. It's iSIMS. Those are the ones that the feds will come after, that regulators will come after. The ability for organizations to use AI to cut out a lot of the noise and to properly like rank candidates, do some screening, do some selection, I think has a lot of promise. I just don't think we're there today. So it's not that I'm poo-pooing it. It's not that I don't want AI to be part of the process. I just think that we've been sold this bill of goods by too many vendors who are over-promising and under-delivering. And there's a lot of liability. It's one thing if like it's a 20-person startup in San Francisco with a bunch of VC money, and they get sued and they go out of business. Well, okay, San Francisco culture is fail fast, fail often, eventually you'll be a success. So failing is actually kind of like cherished there. But if you're a Fortune 1000 company and you're on the hook because you just used that tech provided by that little startup, guess who has the deep pockets? And guess who the C-suite is going to be looking at when they're sending out pink slips because somebody selected that software and used that software. So I really feel like the TA people need to do a lot more due diligence in this. They need to probably bring in their IT team and listen to their lawyers. Rather than trying to save a few dollars here and there, slow down. You can do this in 2026. This doesn't need to be in 2025.
It reminds me when we first started our call, we talked about early days of the internet. I feel that, in 99, there was the .com, implosion.
Yeah.
It feels like it's very frothy right now. And it feels like that where it's, you just put AI in front or back of your name as a company or as a product. And of course your valuation explodes. But the reality, it just seems that there'll be a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Some might fail, like you said.
Yeah.
But it's almost like that 95 to 99 time period. It was fun for all the .coms. Like, wait, what's this website? Some of the commercials were really unique back then.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like we're in that space now. And then once that happened, so from 2000 forward, some of the noise went away, and then some of the players they started moving into that Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 company. I mean, it's funny to look back. I mean, our kids and other kids, like they don't realize that Amazon only sold books initially.
Right. And lost a massive amount of money for years.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, including me, felt like, how the heck can this company ever make money when I can go to Barnes and Noble or Borders and it's like 4 blocks from my home and
Right.
buy a book today? So if I want a book today, probably within the next couple of days, I'll have the time to go over to Barnes and Noble, pick out the book, cash out, bring it home. Well, lo and behold, I can go onto Amazon right now, buy that book, and have it delivered in some cases today, almost certainly tomorrow. So it
Sure.
became more convenient. And
Not
the
counting the digital download books.
yeah, I mean, I love your analogy, Jay. The late '90s, it was such a Wild West era, and a lot of it looking back, it's hard to really relate to just how stupid so many of the things were. An example, I'm 59, so and again, our website went live in '96, so I was very immersed in all of this. And one of the other things that I remember was there were TV commercials, but they were like regular TV commercials where you could buy 200 million email addresses on a CD and it'd be like $200. Well, there were a lot of people buying those to build mailing lists. And looking back on that, how crazy stupid was that for like everybody involved other than the company that was cashing those checks and maybe they're like own some small island in the South Pacific now, the people behind that. But all of the buyers and using that to basically spam everybody on AOL. What a horrible waste of money. How annoying. Now totally illegal to do that kind of thing. But is it all that different from the TA vendors that are essentially scraping LinkedIn and reselling that data? With some of the agentic AI companies that promise to take your desired profile, like this is the kind of person we want to have hire, and they're going to go out and scour the internet and they're going to email those people on your behalf. Is that any different than that CD with 200 million email addresses and facilitating the spam? I mean, where do the employers think these agentic AI companies are getting the candidate data from? Do they think it's not from LinkedIn? Do they think that LinkedIn is okay with that? Do they think that LinkedIn won't be likely to sue them? It's like, hello, LinkedIn absolutely is going to sue some of these companies, and they should, and they're going to win. As a TA leader, if I was a TA leader, I wouldn't want to be on the wrong end of a LinkedIn lawsuit.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's authors that are really upset their books are being scraped,
Yep.
articles from magazines in years past. Obviously, let's get into the whole music thing. That's late to the game.
Are
Some of these
you
other
are you
industries.
saying that you care about musicians and their assets, their intellectual property? Are you saying that that's an issue for you?
Well, what's funny is that all these other industries that are being disrupted because like things are being scraped or ran through AI. It's like, well, Napster,
Yeah.
25 years ago, it hit the music industry really, really hard. And one of the first ones that got disrupted, besides email versus the post office of sending a letter or a card. And we heard people all the time say, well, that's new technology, or the bands will make money other ways. It's like, well, why do you get to tell me how to have a business model?
Yeah.
Or if it
Yeah.
was Metallica or Aerosmith,
Why?
and it's like they already made their money, but new bands that are trying to find an audience, they were really upset because they would release things, and why would you buy a CD for 15 $20 sometimes back in the late 90s, early 2000s when you can just go on Napster find it for free? But then the flip side is it also created a whole new audience of people never would have found that artist. So if that's where we're in this weird thing where if an author has something scraped, you're like, I never heard of this person. I love their work now on whatever the topic is. Maybe they have a website to go check out. They have other books they can buy, a speaking engagement tour, or a different podcast, a YouTube channel. So we're in this weird thing, and it's hitting so many areas right now, including hiring and tech platforms.
Yeah, we should not be forcing artists, content creators, companies to be subsidizing the business models of some other for-profit corporation, right? Like a Napster, right? Musicians should not have been forced to subsidize the business model of Napster by giving away to Napster their content for free that then allowed Napster to profit off of that. Thankfully, They didn't get away with it. Napster didn't get away with it. Now, with like a somewhat similar service, Spotify, as an artist, you can opt in, you can opt out. If you choose to, you don't have to have your music on Spotify. Now, artists, I think, have a legitimate concern about, well, if we're not on Spotify, who's going to listen to my music? And I get that it's that's still an issue, but it's a bit different than forcing them to give away their assets, their livelihood. With LinkedIn, LinkedIn should not be forced to give away its intellectual property, the data that it's gathered, the profiles that it's built, the site that it operates to subsidize the business models of these agentic AI companies. If the agentic AI companies want to use LinkedIn data, awesome. Pay LinkedIn for the use of that data. But they shouldn't just be able to go out there and use it for free.
I have a bonus lightning round of a few hiring questions I'm gonna throw at you
Cool.
right now. What do you think is one hiring myth that needs to go away?
Hiring myth that needs to go away is that employers hire the best qualified candidate. Does that happen? Yes. Is that usually the goal? No. Employers tend to hire the first well qualified candidate that both applies and accepts the offer. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I actually think that's a good thing. But I was just in a conversation earlier today with somebody on LinkedIn, an employer, and she had 1,000 applications for one opening. And she was like, of course I have to do that. If I don't allow everybody to apply to that job, I won't be able to hire the best person. Well, if you wait for 1,000 people to apply and then you go through those manually like she was, you are by definition not going to hire the best person because that person won't be around by the time you get back to them with an offer.
What is a favorite trend in recruiting right now?
Our business is I'm a little biased here. So one of my favorite trends in recruiting is that employers are becoming increasingly data driven rather than using data to justify decisions that they've already made through gut or because they've always done it that way and they heard some consultant maybe at a conference say they should do this and it's like, oh, I can pretend that I'm actually doing it that way. They're actually using more and more data to justify decisions. And that means things like in our industry and with the job board industry, that rather than employers buying postings, resume searching, et cetera, from the sites that they're most familiar with that had Super Bowl ads, like back in the day to date myself, instead, they're following the data. Where do we get the best response? And they're objectively measuring that. So more and more employers are running ads based upon the effective cost per application. So they might pay $300 to one job board, $200 to another, $3 to another, whatever. And that doesn't really matter. If they get a whole bunch of really highly qualified candidates from the cheapest source, great. The most expensive source, great. It's about the eCPA.
What do you think is the worst buzzword in HR tech right now? Maybe besides AI.
Darn it. Well, that's not fair. I think the worst, other than AI, the worst buzzword, I think that one of the ones that bugs me is assessments, scientifically validated assessments. There are scientifically validated assessments, but the fact that your vendor tells you it's scientifically validated does not mean that it's scientifically validated. I take a vitamin C pill every day. Has it ever been scientifically validated? No. Do I believe that it helps me prevent colds and whatever? Yeah. But it also costs like 3 cents. So there's really like no harm. But when you're using an assessment to rank candidates and it's not scientifically validated, it's basically using the same methodology as Myers-Briggs, which has all of the scientific validity of astrology. That is not a good way to hire people. So the scientifically validated assessments is, if I was a TA leader, I would really be digging into that and trying to understand exactly what that science is and not relying on the gobbledygook that a lot of the vendors are throwing at you.
And what is maybe one thing you wish every employer knew about early career candidates?
That the majority of college and university students and graduates do not go to work in a job that is consistent with their major. So you definitely have some majors like, say, engineering, nursing, where Absolutely. The vast majority of engineering majors become engineers. The vast majority of nursing majors become nurses. And those are the exceptions. A lot of employers, when they're hiring people for, say, like financial services, will only interview students with finance degrees, economics degrees. And the reality is that job requires really good critical thinking skills. And the people on campus who tend to have the best critical thinking school skills, and I'm saying this as a former finance major, are not the finance students. They're the liberal arts majors.
Yeah, we've seen that move from STEM to STEAM, adding in that
Yes.
A for the arts to have that little bit of a balance. Okay, I like to do what I like to call I jump into the Encore section where we get into some fun pop culture questions. So, if you were to share your Spotify or Apple Music playlist, what are some artists we would find?
Portugal the Man of Monsters and Men. I I'm pretty sure that if I still had an 8-track player, that I would have had to replace the 8-track on both of those because I would have worn it out.
What was the last show, concert, or play or event you attended?
Well, I'll say what I'm going to attend because I'm pretty excited about it. So I'm going to a blues festival tomorrow. Yeah, so there'll be a variety of artists, none of which I've ever heard of, which is also part of what's going to make it really fun. Because I love to hear people who play really awesome music, and maybe it's just a side hustle.
No, it's great. It's like going to a pop-up restaurant you've never been to and like, hey, let's just go in and try it.
Right. I mean, unless they specialize in things like, medium rare chicken, then I'll let you take that one on, and I'll pass.
What is a guilty pleasure of yours? What could be food, a TV show, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, and this is dating myself. Rocky Road ice cream. You don't tend to find that too much anymore, but when I see it, I gotta have it.
Yeah, mine was chocolate chip cookie dough. I miss it. What is a fun or unique fact that maybe people don't know about you?
I was, let's call it, interviewed when I was, I think, 18 or 19 years old by the Winnipeg Police Department. You mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast that I ran a fantasy hockey pool. What you didn't mention was that there were 5,000 entrants into it, and we were charging money. And the initial plan was to charge money. The Winnipeg Police Department got wind of it and invited my co-organizers and me in for a discussion, and laid out in no uncertain terms that this would be a criminal offense because there was too much of an element of chance, not enough of an element of skill. And that if we wanted to go ahead, and several of the officers said they would love to be part of this fantasy pool, but so they thought it was like really cool that we were doing this, but we probably shouldn't be charging money for it. You could do that kind of thing and have prizes if you didn't charge any money for it. So we kind of revamped, and basically the organizations that were giving away the prizes for like who had the most points were like the Winnipeg Jets and hockey team. You got the first prize was 2 season tickets to the next season, and the Jets paid us for kind of the mailing list. So we switched the business model. Instead of charging the entrants, we ended up charging the companies that were giving the prizes away for the mailing list. I guess looking back on it, the expression of like, if you, it's like, it was, I think it was about Facebook. If you're not paying for the service, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. Looking back, maybe that's what we were doing.
Early on, right? You're creating it right then and there. So, what is the last show maybe you binge watched on one of the streaming platforms like Netflix or HBO? One
Yeah,
of the
my wife and I last night finished Department Q. On Netflix, British cop show. I suspect that there'll be additional seasons, but the first season was 9 episodes. Basically, grumpy man detective goes out and like solves this like murder mystery. And no, I won't give you more than that because I don't want to spoil it. But if you liked Broadchurch or Slow Horses or even like a Law and Order, then you'll really love this.
Stephen, this was packed with insight. Thank you for being generous with your time and your knowledge. I'll make sure I have different links for different podcasts you're on and everything in the show notes. If you found value in this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends and network. Until next time, keep rocking HR excellence.